Hello, this is Sarah with Posh Pooch Designs, and today's video I'm going to show you how to make this warm shells throw crochet pattern. Now you can see that it's made out of Bernat pop, and you're going to need about 14 ounces of Bernat pop or any worsted weight number 4 yarn to make this throw. But you can make it in any size, and I'll show you that when we get a little farther into the video. Now this is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath the video. So to make this warm shells throw, you're going to need 14 ounces of Bernat pop yarn or any worsted weight number 4 yarns. Now I liked using these long striping yarns because you don't have to change colors as you go. This one is in grays, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to turn out in the gray colors. Now this one here is called Gold Rush, I believe, and this one here I have is called Ebony and Ivory, which I just really love grays and blacks together. Now, the way this pattern works is it's done on a repeat, and you can make it as wide as you want or as long as you want. If you make this throw according to my written pattern, it's going to be about 29 by 44 inches. But remember, everybody stitches differently. Some stitch tighter and some stitch looser, and so it may be a little bigger or smaller. But I am, like I said, going to show you how to adjust the pattern for any size throw that you would like. We're going to be stitching today with our J10 hook. It's a 5.00 millimeter hook. And you'll also need a needle for weaving in those ends and a pair of scissors. So you don't really need much but your hook and yarn. So go grab you some and we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we need to do is to make our slip knot. And then we're going to chain 121 chains. Now, if you want to make your throw wider, because that's what we're doing here, you're going to need to chain multiples of 9 plus 2. All right, multiples of 9 plus 2. That will make it wider. And of course, if you want to make it longer, you'll just do more rows. Now, chaining 121 chains is a lot of chains. And so what I do is I'll chain 50 chains, which this isn't 50 here, but I'm just going to show you what I do. And then I take another piece of yarn that's a different color, and I just slide it through that chain. Like that. And then sometimes I'll make a knot and then I can cut it off later. But I do that so that I don't lose count. For instance, I'll do 50 chains and I'll put a piece of green yarn. Then I'll do another 50 chain and put another piece of green yarn. And this helps me keep from losing my place. All right. So let's go ahead and chain our 121 chains, or more or less, depending if you want to change the size of your throw. I chained my 121 chains. I marked it twice, each at the 50 chain marks, and then of course the last few are my 21 marks. And now we're going to turn. And to begin our pattern, our first 3 chains here count as 1 double crochet. We're going to double crochet in the 4th chain. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now I'm going to pull that out just in case you're not sure what a double crochet is. Yarn over your hook, go in the chain, pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. That's your double crochet. The next thing that we're going to do is skip the next 2 chains, and we're going to stitch a shell stitch in that third one. And our shell stitch consists of 2 double crochets, a chain 1, and 2 double crochets. So we're going to yarn over our hook. We're going to go in this third chain and pull up a loop. Yarn over and go through those 2, yarn over, go through the next 2, and then we'll do another double crochet in that same stitch. We're going to chain 1, and then we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in this same stitch. And that's our shell stitch. Now we're going to skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So we're skipping 2, we'll stitch 1 double crochet, and then a double crochet in the next chain. Okay, and this is the way the pattern's going to work. We're going to do 2 double crochets, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2, 2 double crochets. All right, so let's do it again. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches. We're going to stitch a shell stitch in that third stitch. I've already got my yarn over. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to stitch 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. Now we're going to skip the next 2 stitches and stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2. 1 and 2. Can you see the pattern emerging there? All right. I'll pull out my green yarn. Probably should pull this one out too, but I'll get that later. All right, so we're going to skip 2 stitches. We're going to stitch a shell stitch in the next, which, as we've stated, is 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. Skip the next 2 stitches and stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2. 1 and 2. Then we're going to skip the next 2 and stitch a shell stitch. There we go. Didn't want to get on my hook. All right, 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets in the same stitch. That's our shell stitch. We'll skip the next 2 chains, and then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2 chains. All right, let's look at it again so that you can get a good idea of how it's supposed to look. 2 double crochets, shell, 2 double crochets, shell, 2 double crochets, shell, all the way across. We'll do this all the way across, and you should end up at the end with 1 double crochet in your last 2 stitches. So let's go ahead and keep going. Skip the next 2, and we'll stitch a shell stitch just as soon as I get this knot out of my yarn. So I got that knot out of my yarn, and I finished my row across, stitching my shells and my 2 double crochets. You should end up with 13 shell stitches and 14 sets of 2 double crochets. We're going to chain 3, and we're going to turn. Now that first chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and then we're going to double crochet in the next double crochet. Now we're going to skip over to the chain 1 space in the center of our shell stitch, and we're going to stitch a shell stitch. So we'll stitch 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets right in the top in that chain 1 space of our shell stitch. So there's our shell stitch. We stitched in our shell stitch. And now we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in each of those 2 double crochets. And this is the way this row will work. You'll stitch a shell stitch and a shell stitch. And then you'll stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2 double crochets. And again you'll stitch a shell stitch in that chain 1 stitch of the shell stitch. And 1 double crochet in each of the 2 double crochets. You will repeat this all the way across the row. Shell stitch, 2 double crochets, shell stitch, 2 double crochets, shell stitch, 2 double crochets, all the way across. So I completed the second row, shell stitches, 2 double crochets, and so now I'm going to chain 3, and I'm going to turn. And from here on out, all of the rows will be stitched exactly the way we stitched the last row. Our chain 3 counts as a double crochet, so we'll stitch in the next double crochet a double crochet, and then we'll stitch a shell stitch in the chain 1 space of the shell stitch. And of course our shell stitch is 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. And then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in those 2 double crochets. And again, a shell stitch in the chain 1 space of the next shell stitch. And like I said, this is the way all the remainder of the rows are stitched. You just repeat this row until it's as long as you would like it. Once you reach the last row that you would like to do, you just tie off and weave in your end. Now if you make the pattern according to what I have, you'll need to do a total of 42 rows. But you can make it as long or short as needed. So just to repeat, you're going to continue to repeat this row, 2 double crochets, shell stitch, 2 double crochets, shell stitch, all the way across for as many rows as needed. So here is the warm shells throw that I made using the same stitch pattern. We've got our 2 double crochets and then shell, 2 double crochets, shell, 2 double crochets on every row, and you do it for as long as you would like your throw. And remember, if you want to make your throw wider at the beginning, you chain in multiples of 9 plus 2. And that's because we have those 2 double crochets at the beginning, and then each repeat is 9 stitches. 2, 1 for the shell, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So we have 9 stitches for the repeat. So make your throw as long as you would like or as wide as you would like with this stitch pattern. And remember, you can use any of the long striping yarns, or you can use any worsted weight number 4 yarns to make a warm shells throw.